All right, let's kick off this deep dive. Buckle up, everyone, because we're about to tackle some of those big questions, the kind that keep you staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m.
The deep stuff, huh? I'm game if you are.
Oh, I'm always up for a good existential exploration. And lucky for us, we've got some fascinating source material to guide our journey today.
Oh, yeah. Let's hear it. What are we diving into?
Well, you know how our listeners are super into philosophy and the whole what happens after we die thing?
Yeah.
Well, they sent us this book, Allan Kardec's Vision of Heaven and Hell by Anton Kabaroski.
Intriguing title. And Kardec, that rings a bell. Isn't he the guy behind Spiritism?
You got it. So we're going to be diving into the Spiritist perspective on life, death, and what might be waiting for us on the other side.
Ooh, sounds like we're in for some mind-bending concepts.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're talking reincarnation, spiritual planes, even angels and demons, but not as you might typically picture them.
All right, I'm hooked already.
Great. But before we get into all that, the book starts off by tackling something pretty relatable, I think. That feeling of, what if it's just nothing after this life?
Oh, yeah. I think we've all had a brush with that existential dread at some point, right? Like staring into the abyss and wondering, what's the point of it all?
Totally. And this book suggests that this fear, this idea of nothingness after death, can actually manifest in some pretty interesting ways in how we live our lives.
Like how? Give me an example.
Well, think about it. If you believe that this life is all there is, wouldn't you be tempted to kind of go all out in terms of seeking pleasure, acquiring possessions? Like, those are the only things that matter.
Right. Like eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die kind of thing. Makes sense.
Exactly. The book calls this materialism. It's like trying to build a wall of stuff around yourself to protect yourself from the void.
It's almost like if you don't believe in anything beyond this material world, then the material world becomes everything, right?
Yeah, that's all you got. But then there's another reaction to this fear of nothingness that the book talks about, and it's even bleaker.
Oh, what's that?
It's called nihilism, and it's basically the belief that life is ultimately meaningless. Like, if death is the end, then why bother with anything?
Oh, that's a tough one to grapple with.
It is. I mean, think about the implications for society. If nothing matters, why make an effort? Why strive for anything beyond basic survival?
Right. Why build relationships, create art, work towards a better future?
Exactly. It almost feels like that kind of thinking could erode the foundation of everything that holds us together as humans.
That's pretty chilling when you put it that way.
It is, right. And the book actually gives some pretty stark examples of how this can play out.
Oh, like what?
Well, there's one story about this young guy who inherits a fortune, but he just squanders it all recklessly. No investments, no planning for the future, just pure indulgence.
Wow. And why? Just because he figures it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because in his mind there is no future, so why bother?
Yikes. That's kind of a terrifying thought. Makes you wonder if maybe the belief in something beyond this life, whether it's an afterlife or just a legacy, is part of what keeps us striving,
Totally. Like, maybe it's that hope for something more that motivates us to be better, to care for each other, to create things that will outlast us.
It's a compelling argument, isn't it?
It really is. And it brings us to Allan Kardec and his philosophy of Spiritism.
All right, finally, let's get to the heart of it. So how does Spiritism tackle this whole fear of nothingness thing?
Well, for starters, it offers a very different perspective on what happens after we die.
Oh, do tell.
Well, one of the core tenets of Spiritism is the idea of the immortality of the soul. It's the belief that we're more than just our physical bodies. There's a spiritual essence within us that continues to exist after death.
Ah, so it's like saying there's a part of us, a spark of consciousness that transcends the physical realm.
Exactly. Like, you're not your body. Your body is just a temporary home for your spirit.
Okay, I can see how that would be comforting to folks who are wrestling with that fear of ceasing to exist.
Totally. And this leads to another really intriguing concept, reincarnation.
Reincarnation, now we're talking. So what's the Spiritist take on that?
They see it as a kind of school. Like, life is a series of lessons and experiences designed to help our souls evolve.
So we're not just here for one go-round. We get multiple chances to learn and grow.
Exactly. Each incarnation is a new opportunity to learn new lessons, confront our weaknesses, develop our virtues.
So it's like each life is a semester in this grand cosmic university.
I love that analogy. And yeah, it's like each lifetime gives us a chance to become a little bit better, a little bit wiser, a little bit closer to our full potential.
I like that. It makes those challenges we face in life seem a little less pointless, you know?
Right. Like, what if those struggles are actually opportunities for spiritual growth in disguise?
Okay, I'm on board with that idea. So, immortality of the soul, reincarnation. Anything else we should know about this spiritism thing before we go any further?
Well, there's one more key principle that ties into all of this, and it's called the law of cause and effect.
Oh, you mean karma?
Exactly. It's the idea that every action, every thought, every choice we make has consequences that ripple out beyond this life.
So what we do now impacts not just this life, but also future lives.
Precisely. It encourages us to live with intention, knowing that our choices have long-term consequences for ourselves and for others.
Makes you think twice about cutting someone off in traffic, doesn't it?
For real.
Yeah.
But that's not all. The book also highlights some other surprising details about the Spiritist worldview. For instance, did you know that Spiritists believe Earth is just one of many inhabited planets?
Wait, seriously? So they're saying we're not alone in the universe?
Nope. According to Kardec, there's a whole cosmos teeming with life. All sorts of worlds out there, each at its own stage of spiritual evolution.
Whoa. Okay, now my mind is officially blown.
Right. So much to think about. But let's bring it back down to Earth for a minute. I know what you're really waiting for.
Yeah? What's that?
We got to talk about heaven and hell, Spiritist style.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
Because trust me, this isn't your grandma's version of the afterlife.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Lay it on me. What does Spiritism say about heaven and hell? Is it all fire and brimstone and pearly gates?
Not even close. This is where things get really interesting. You see, Spiritism doesn't see heaven and hell as physical places, but as states of being.
States of being. Okay, I'm listening.
So instead of being sent to a specific location after you die, your experience is shaped by your inner world, your spiritual state.
So it's not about being judged and sent to a particular place, but about your own inner state creating your reality.
Exactly. Like if you lived a life filled with love, kindness, compassion, that inner harmony naturally creates what we might call a heavenly experience.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those of us who, maybe haven't quite reached sainthood status in this life? What happens then?
Well, that's where the Spiritist idea of hell comes in. But again, forget the fiery pits and demons with pitchforks.
Okay, good, because that imagery has never really sat well with me. So if it's not a literal place, what is it?
It's more like a state of inner turmoil, a consequence of carrying all that unresolved stuff from this life. The regrets, the negativity, the attachments, all that baggage.
Oh, so it's not so much external punishment as it is?
Yeah.
Like self-inflicted disharmony.
You got it. And this is where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
Can't wait.
All right, so we're back, and we're picking up right where we left off with this fascinating Spiritist concept of heaven and hell as states of being rather than actual places.
It definitely flips the script on those traditional ideas, doesn't it? Like no pearly gates or fiery pits.
Nope, none of that. Instead, it's all about your inner world, your spiritual state, shaping your experience after death.
So it's not about being judged by some higher power and sent to a specific place, but more about our own internal state, creating the kind of reality we experience in the afterlife.
That's the idea.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it, but could you give me an example? Like, how does this whole state of being thing actually play out?
Sure. Think about it this way. If you lived a life filled with love, kindness, generosity, compassion, those good vibes.
Yeah.
Well, in the afterlife, that inner harmony would naturally create a state of peace and joy, what we might call a heavenly experience.
Ah, so your inner state kind of radiates outward and creates the environment that best reflects who you are. That makes sense.
Exactly. But now let's flip the coin. What about those of us who, let's just say, haven't quite achieved sainthood status in this lifetime?
Yeah, what happens to us regular folks who've made our fair share of mistakes?
Well, that's where the Spiritist concept of hell comes into play. But hold on. Before you conjure up those images of fire and brimstone and demons with pitchforks.
Yeah, please. No more fire and brimstone. We already established that's not what we're talking about here.
Right. Instead, try to imagine hell as a state of inner turmoil, a consequence of carrying unresolved issues, regrets, and negativity with you from past lives.
So it's not about some external punishment being inflicted upon you, but more like a self-inflicted state of disharmony.
That's a great way to put it. It's like carrying a heavy backpack full of emotional baggage into the afterlife.
Yeah.
That weight, that negativity, that's what creates a hellish experience.
It's almost like your own conscience becomes your tormentor.
That's a really powerful way to think about it. And, this concept of a self-created hell is actually, dare I say, a bit more merciful than the traditional view of eternal damnation.
Oh, so.
Well, because it suggests that we're ultimately responsible for our own happiness or suffering, both in this life and the next.
Yeah.
We have the power to choose a different path, to shed that baggage, and to create a more harmonious experience for ourselves.
Okay, I can see that. It's like taking ownership of your own spiritual journey. But here's a question that popped into my mind. If hell, in this Spiritist sense, is all about inner turmoil, does that mean there's no escape?
That's a great question. Like, are we doomed to suffer forever if we haven't resolved all our issues in this lifetime?
Exactly. That would be pretty bleak.
Well, the good news is that suffering, in the Spiritist view, is always temporary, never eternal. It's seen as a catalyst for growth, a chance to confront those negative patterns, and ultimately to purify the soul.
Oh, okay. So it's more like a cosmic timeout.
Yeah.
A chance to learn from your mistakes and then move on.
Yeah, it's like a spiritual boot camp, but eventually you graduate.
Yeah.
And even the souls who are furthest from that heavenly state have the potential to learn, to grow, and to eventually shift their vibration towards greater harmony.
I like that. So there's always hope for progress, no matter where you're starting from.
That's a key principle in Spiritism. But hey, before we get too comfy with this idea of heaven and hell as inner states, there's another wrinkle we need to throw into the mix.
Uh-oh, what's that?
Earth isn't the only game in town. Remember how we talked about Earth being just one of many inhabited planets?
Oh, yeah, right. The whole cosmic school system thing.
Exactly. So according to Kardec, we're not just evolving here on Earth. There's a whole grander journey of spiritual development happening across multiple worlds.
Whoa, so Earth School is just one stop on a much bigger cosmic tour.
You got it. Each world, each planet, offers unique challenges and opportunities for growth that are tailored to our specific needs as evolving souls.
Okay, now you're really blowing my mind. So, are you saying that after we graduate from Earth School, we might move on to, I don't know, advanced compassion studies on planet Xylos? Or maybe a masterclass in universal love on planet Zephyr?
Hey, why not? It's a pretty amazing thought, isn't it? This idea of an ever-expanding journey of self-discovery that goes way beyond our limited experience here on Earth.
It is. But all this talk about other worlds and cosmic education, it kind of makes me wonder about the specifics of how this whole spiritual evolution thing actually plays out in the afterlife. Like, what happens after we die, but before we maybe reincarnate into another life?
You're talking about what Spiritists call the erratic state. It's that period between our earthly incarnations.
Erratic state, huh? Sounds kind of chaotic. What exactly is going on in this in-between zone? Are we just floating around in some ethereal waiting room?
Not exactly. In fact, the term erratic might be a bit misleading because it actually implies chaos or randomness, and that's not really what Spiritism is about.
So what is it about then?
Well, they see this state as being very structured and purposeful. It's a time for continued learning and growth, service to others, even planning for future incarnations.
Okay, so it's not just a passive waiting period, but rather a bustling hub of spiritual activity.
Exactly. But let's break it down a bit. When they talk about learning in this context, what do they mean?
Think of it like a cosmic university for the soul. Spirits have the opportunity to delve into subjects and concepts that were perhaps beyond their grasp while embodied on Earth. They might study philosophy, spirituality, science, art, you name it. Anything that helps them evolve and grow.
Wow, so it's like Earth School, but on a much grander scale.
Exactly, and with hopefully less homework. But it's not just about solitary study. Spirits also engage in service to others during this time.
Oh, how so?
Well, they might act as guides and mentors, sharing their wisdom and experience with less evolved spirits. Kind of helping them navigate the complexities of the spiritual realm.
Oh, that's nice. It's like a cosmic support system.
Exactly. Experienced souls helping newbies find their way. It's a beautiful example of the interconnectedness and compassion that exist in the afterlife.
I'm really digging this. It's so much more comforting and hopeful than the traditional view of judgment and separation that we often hear about. But I have to ask, if spirits are spending all this time learning and helping others, when do they find the time to plan their next big adventure on Earth?
That's another key activity that takes place during this erratic state. Spirits actually participate in planning their future incarnations.
Wait, seriously? So we have a say in what kind of life we're going to have next?
Absolutely. They carefully consider the lessons they want to learn, the challenges they want to overcome, and the missions they want to undertake in their next life on Earth.
Whoa, that's pretty wild.
Hmm.
So are you saying that it's not like being assigned a random role in some cosmic play?
Nope. It's more like a soul-searching career fair. Spirits are evaluating their skills, identifying areas for growth, and choosing the Earth assignment that best suits their evolutionary goals.
That's both fascinating and empowering. It suggests that we have a lot more agency in shaping our destiny than we might realize.
Exactly. It's not about being a passive pawn in some grand cosmic game, but about actively participating in our own evolution.
But this brings up another question. What about those who maybe didn't make the best choices in their previous life? Those who might need a little extra help getting back on track. What happens to them during this erratic state?
Well, that's where Spiritism's emphasis on compassion and growth really shines. Even for those who might have strayed, the erratic state offers opportunities for healing and regeneration.
So it's like a cosmic spa for the soul, a chance to detox from those bad vibes and get a fresh start.
Exactly. Spirits who are carrying emotional baggage or unresolved trauma from past lives can work through those issues, finding healing and peace.
Wow, so it's not all about judgment and punishment. It's more like a chance to process those difficult experiences, release negativity, and prepare for the next incarnation with a cleaner slate.
Precisely. It's about acknowledging that we're all on a journey of growth, and sometimes that journey takes us through some dark valleys, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel, always a chance to heal and to move towards greater harmony.
I'm really loving this Spiritist view of the afterlife. It's so much more hopeful and empowering than some of the other perspectives I've encountered. But I have to ask about something that's been bugging me. We've been talking a lot about this erratic state and all the growth and healing that happens there. But earlier, we also discussed this idea of Earth being a world of trials and expiations. How do those two things fit together?
That's a great question. And it really gets to the heart of why Spiritism sees Earth as such a valuable school for the soul.
Okay, I'm all ears. Lay it on me. What makes Earth such a special place in the grand scheme of things?
Well, think about the challenges we face here on Earth. All those things that make us want to pull our hair out sometimes, the physical limitations, the emotional complexities, the constant interplay of good and evil.
Oh yeah, those things. Can't live with them, can't live without them.
Right. But here's the thing. According to Spiritism, these very challenges create a powerful crucible for spiritual growth. They force us to confront our weaknesses, to make tough choices, and to learn from our mistakes.
So it's like Earth is kind of like a spiritual boot camp. Tough, but effective.
That's a great analogy. It's like a spiritual gym where we can exercise and strengthen our spiritual muscles. The resistance we encounter here, the challenges we overcome, it all accelerates our spiritual development in a way that's simply not possible in the more ethereal realms of the afterlife.
That makes sense. I guess it's like trying to build muscle by lifting feathers. It just wouldn't be very effective. So you're saying that all those things we often complain about here on Earth, like the hardships, the suffering, the complexities of relationships, all that stuff, those are actually the things that make this life so valuable for spiritual growth.
Precisely. And that's why, according to Spiritism, we keep coming back for more. We choose to reincarnate on Earth because we recognize the unique opportunities for growth that exist here.
Wow, that's kind of a mind-blowing concept when you really think about it. It's like we're signing up for a really intense but ultimately rewarding personal development seminar. But if that's the case, if we're consciously choosing to come back to this challenging world, why do we often forget our past lives? Wouldn't it be easier to learn and grow if we remembered all those lessons from before?
That's a great question. And the book actually suggests that forgetting our past lives is a crucial part of the learning process.
Wait, hold on. Back up a second. Are you saying that forgetting is a good thing? How does that work?
Well, imagine starting a new school year with all the baggage and unfinished business from the previous year weighing you down. It would be pretty hard to focus on new lessons and challenges, wouldn't it?
True, true. A fresh start can be really helpful, especially if you totally bombed the last semester.
Exactly. And that's why, according to Spiritism, we're given a clean slate with each new incarnation.
So it's like cosmic amnesia.
You could say that. It allows us to fully immerse ourselves in the present moment, to learn from our experiences without being burdened by past mistakes, and to make new choices that shape our spiritual growth.
I never thought of it that way before. So it's not that we're being punished for past misdeeds by having our memories wiped clean. It's more like a gift, a way to start fresh and focus on the present moment.
Exactly. And, it also helps us to avoid getting too bogged down by those regrets and attachments from past lives.
I can see that. It's like
Yes.
every lifetime is a new chapter, a chance to write a new story without being limited by the plot twists of the past.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
The more we talk about this spiritist view of reincarnation, the more it resonates with me. It's a far cry from the fire and brimstone imagery I grew up with, but it just feels more hopeful, more empowering.
And I think it aligns really well with the idea of a loving and compassionate universe.
I agree. It's like we're not just passive players in some predetermined cosmic drama, but active participants in our own evolution. We have choices, we have responsibilities, and we have the power to shape our own destinies.
Exactly. It's all about embracing that power and making choices that lead us towards greater love, wisdom, and compassion.
Love it. Choice, responsibility, evolution. That's a pretty good motto to live by, wouldn't you say?
Couldn't agree more. But all this talk about choice and responsibility, it makes me wonder how Spiritism views the idea of divine justice. Is there a system of rewards and punishments in the afterlife, or is it all about natural consequences playing out?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Right. Like, is there some cosmic scorecard being kept, or is it more about experiencing the ripple effects of our actions?
Well, this is where things get even more interesting. Because Spiritism actually has a concept called a penal code.
Hold up, a penal code. Now you're really piquing my curiosity. Are you telling me there are cosmic courtrooms and spirit judges doling out sentences in the afterlife?
Not exactly. It's not quite as dramatic as that.
Okay, good, because that would be a bit much, even for me. So if it's not like a legal system, then what is it?
Well, this idea of a penal code in Spiritism is more about recognizing that our actions, our thoughts, our emotions, they all have consequences, both in this life and in the next. And those consequences are not arbitrary punishments handed down by some external force. They're more like natural outcomes that arise from the choices we make.
So it's less about judgment and more about cause and effect.
Exactly. It's like a universal law that operates on a spiritual level. You reap what you sow, so to speak, but all plays out on a much grander scale in the afterlife.
Makes sense. So it's more like karma than a legal system.
Precisely. And it highlights this idea that our choices have ripple effects that extend far beyond our immediate perception.
I can see that. It's like everything we do, every thought we have, every word we speak, it sends out these little energetic ripples that impact the world around us.
Yes, and those ripples don't just disappear when we die. They continue to reverberate in the spiritual realm, and we experience those effects in the afterlife.
That's a pretty powerful thought. So it's not about punishment, but more about understanding the true impact of our actions and, learning to make choices that align with our highest good.
Exactly. It's about taking responsibility for our actions and recognizing that those actions have consequences, even if we can't immediately see those consequences in this lifetime.
Okay. I think I'm starting to wrap my head around this penal code idea. But does it apply to every little thing we do?
Ah, good question.
Yeah.
Like, are we being judged for every white lie, every snarky comment, every time we cut someone off in traffic?
Yeah, exactly. Is there some cosmic scorecard being kept?
Luckily, no. It's not about keeping score or punishing us for every minor transgression. It's more about recognizing that even small actions can have consequences and that those seemingly insignificant choices can accumulate over time.
So it's more about cultivating a greater awareness of the impact of our actions.
Precisely. And realizing that those actions shape our character, both in this life and in the next.
Got it. So it's not about upsetting over every little mistake, but about becoming more conscious of how our choices, even the small ones, contribute to the overall tapestry of our lives.
Exactly. But now what about those bigger mistakes? The ones that might have more serious consequences.
Yeah, like what about actions that cause harm to others?
Right, like criminal acts or acts of violence, things like that. How does Spiritism deal with those kinds of offenses?
Well, those actions definitely have consequences in the afterlife, but again, it's not about punishment for punishment's sake.
Okay, so what is it about them?
It's more about understanding the impact of those actions, feeling the pain we've inflicted on others, and learning to make different choices in the future.
So it's like facing the karmic mirror of your actions.
Precisely. And it's a powerful motivator for cultivating compassion and making amends, both in this life and in the next.
Yeah, that's a really profound concept.
Yeah.
It's not about revenge or retribution. It's about understanding, healing, and ultimately finding redemption. But I gotta be honest with you, this whole idea of a penal code, even if it's based on natural consequences, it still makes the afterlife sound a bit scary.
I hear you. I think it's easy to get caught up in the idea of consequences and forget that Spiritism is ultimately a philosophy of hope and growth.
So remind me, how does this concept of a penal code fit into that more hopeful perspective?
Well, the key thing to remember is that suffering in the afterlife is always temporary and always serves a purpose. It's never about eternal punishment.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that.
It's more about learning from mistakes and becoming better, more evolved beings. The ultimate goal is to guide us toward greater happiness and fulfillment.
That definitely makes it a bit easier to swallow. So even though there might be some tough lessons to learn in the afterlife, it's not about being punished or condemned. It's about growth and the possibility of positive change.
Exactly. But sometimes it helps to see these abstract concepts illustrated with real life examples. Are there any stories in the book that show this penal code in action?
Oh yeah, there are. And some of them are pretty intense. There's one that really stands out about this guy who, during his earthly life, was super selfish and materialistic, like totally obsessed with wealth and possessions.
Okay, so what happened to him after he died?
Well, in the afterlife, he found himself drawn to an environment that kind of mirrored those earthly desires.
Oh, so he was surrounded by all the riches he could ever want.
Yes. But here's the twist. Even though he was surrounded by abundance, he couldn't actually experience any of it. He was constantly tantalized by what he desired, but he could never truly grasp or enjoy it.
Whoa, so it's like he's trapped in this gilded cage of his own making.
Exactly. It's like a cosmic version of be careful what you wish for. He had all the wealth he could ever want, but it brought him no happiness because he hadn't developed those inner qualities of generosity and detachment.
So even if you're surrounded by material wealth in the afterlife, if you haven't cultivated those spiritual values, it's all meaningless.
Precisely. True happiness, according to Spiritism, comes from inner growth and fulfillment, not from external possessions or validation.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's a good reminder that the values we cultivate in this life have a huge impact on our experience in the next.
I totally agree. The choices we make, the way we treat others, the things we prioritize, it all matters. And it's not about trying to earn rewards or avoid punishments. It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences, both positive and negative. And those consequences shape our experience, both in this life and in the next.
That's a great way to sum it up. It's all about understanding that life, both here and in the afterlife, is a journey of learning, growth, and the pursuit of true happiness.
Love that. And I think this idea of a penal code, even though it sounds a bit harsh at first, actually reinforces that concept. It's not about punishment, but about understanding the impact of our choices and learning to align ourselves with what truly brings joy and fulfillment.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
But before we wrap up this fascinating exploration of Spiritism, I have one more question about this whole penal code thing. If the goal of suffering is to help us grow, and if we're constantly evolving in the afterlife anyway, why bother with reincarnation at all? Why come back to Earth if we can just learn and evolve in the spirit world?
Ah, that is the question. And it brings us back to why Spiritism sees Earth as such a unique and valuable school for the soul.
Okay, you've got me hooked again. What makes Earth so special in the grand scheme of spiritual evolution?
Well, we've already talked about those challenges we face here on Earth, right? The
Mhm.
physical limitations, the emotional complexities, the constant struggle between good and evil.
Yeah, all the fun stuff.
Right. Well, according to Spiritism, those challenges are actually what make this life so valuable for spiritual growth.
So it's like Earth is a spiritual weight room. Like the heavier the weights, the stronger we get.
Exactly. Think of those challenges as resistance training for the soul. The more we push against that resistance, the stronger we become.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like trying to build muscle by lifting those little pink dumbbells.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be very effective. So you're saying that all those things we often complain about here on Earth, the hardships, the suffering, the complexities of human relationships, those are actually the things that make this life so valuable for spiritual growth.
Precisely. It's like a spiritual boot camp. It's tough, but it gets results. And that's why, according to Spiritism, we keep coming back for more. We choose to reincarnate on Earth because we recognize the incredible opportunities for growth that exist here.
It's like signing up for a really hardcore personal development seminar.
Right, but with higher stakes.
I get it. No pain, no spiritual gain. But if we're the ones choosing these challenges, why do we forget our past lives? Like we were talking about earlier, wouldn't it be easier to learn and grow if we remembered all those lessons from before?
That's where things get even more interesting. Remember how we were discussing the benefits of a clean slate earlier? Well, the book suggests that forgetting our past lives is actually a crucial part of the learning process.
Hold on, back up a second. Are you saying that forgetting is a good thing? How does that work?
Well, think about it. Imagine starting a new school year with all the baggage and unfinished business from the previous year weighing you down. It would be pretty hard to focus on new lessons and challenges, wouldn't it?
That's true. A fresh start can be really helpful, especially if the last semester was a complete disaster.
Exactly. And that's why, in Spiritism, we're given a clean slate with each new incarnation. It allows us to fully immerse ourselves in the present moment, to learn from our experiences without being burdened by past mistakes, and to make new choices that shape our spiritual growth.
So it's not that we're being punished for past misdeeds by having our memories wiped clean. It's
Yeah.
more like it's an act of cosmic kindness, like a way to give us a fresh start and help us focus on the present moment.
Exactly. It's like every lifetime is a new chapter, a chance to write a new story without being limited by the plot twists of the past.
I love that analogy. And, the more we talk about this spiritist view of reincarnation, the more it resonates with me. It's a far cry from the fire and brimstone imagery I grew up with, but it just feels more hopeful, more empowering, more aligned with the idea of a loving and compassionate universe.
I totally agree. It's like we're not just passive players in some predetermined cosmic drama, but active participants in our own evolution. We have choices, we have responsibilities, and we have the power to shape our own destinies, both in this life and in the next.
Yes, and that's a message that I think we all need to hear. But hey, speaking of powerful forces shaping our destinies, we got to talk about angels and demons. I know our listeners probably wondering how Spiritism reimagines those classic figures of good and evil.
All right, let's do it. Get ready for another perspective shift. Remember how we talked about heaven and hell being states of being, not actual places?
Yeah.
Well, Spiritism applies that same logic to angels and demons.
Wait, are you saying that they're not actual beings and more like states of spiritual evolution?
Exactly.
Oh, okay, my mind is officially blown. So, in this view, angels aren't those winged creatures with halos that we often see in paintings and movies.
Nope, they're not about the looks.
So who are they then?
Well, Spiritism sees angels as highly evolved spirits who have dedicated themselves to goodness, love, and serving others. They've reached a level of spiritual maturity where their thoughts, emotions, and actions just naturally radiate positivity and compassion.
So it's not about their appearance, but about their inner state of being.
Exactly. They're like beacons of light and love in the spiritual realm.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about demons? What's their deal in this worldview?
Well, just like with angels, Spiritism doesn't see demons as inherently evil beings. They're not fallen angels or devils in the traditional sense.
Okay, so if they're not little red guys with horns and pitchforks, then who are they?
Well, they're more like spirits who are still grappling with their lower impulses, things like selfishness, anger, greed, jealousy.
Ah, so they're still working through some stuff.
Exactly. They're still in the early stages of their spiritual evolution, making choices that create suffering for themselves and others.
So it's like they haven't quite figured out how to use their spiritual muscles for good yet.
You got it. It's like they're stuck in spiritual kindergarten while the angels are off doing their PhDs.
That's a great analogy. So it's like there's a spiritual spectrum with angels at one end and demons at the other and everyone else somewhere in between.
That's a great way to visualize it. And here's the key point. Spiritism teaches that no one is permanently stuck in a demonic state. Even the most troubled spirits have the potential to evolve, to learn from their mistakes, and to eventually become more angelic in their nature.
That's a really beautiful and hopeful message. It's like saying that everyone, no matter where they are on their journey, has the potential for redemption and spiritual growth.
Absolutely. We're all works in progress, constantly evolving and moving towards the light.
I love that. But if demons aren't inherently evil beings, why do they sometimes act in such negative ways? Why would a spirit who's on a path to goodness intentionally cause harm?
That's a great question. And it brings up the concept of spiritual influence. You see, Spiritism teaches that spirits can influence each other, both for good and for ill.
Wait, so it's like a spiritual peer pressure?
Kind of. Like spirits who are still clinging to those negative emotions and desires might gravitate towards others with similar vibrations, and they might try to influence others to make choices that align with their own negativity.
Ah, so it's like hanging out with the wrong crowd, but on a spiritual level? But what about the influence of angels? How does that work? Do they ever, like, intervene in our lives?
Well, angels, being more evolved spirits, are naturally drawn to those who are striving for goodness and seeking spiritual growth. They often work behind the scenes, subtly guiding and inspiring us towards positive choices and actions.
So they're like our spiritual cheerleaders.
Exactly. They want to see us thrive and evolve, but they also respect our free will. They won't force their guidance upon us. It's more about offering those gentle nudges and inspirations, hoping we'll choose the path of love and growth.
That's really comforting, knowing that we have these evolved beings on our side, rooting for us to succeed. But how can we know if we're being influenced by an angel? What are the signs?
Angelic influence often manifests as those subtle but powerful feelings and experiences. Have you ever felt a sudden surge of inspiration, a feeling of deep peace and comfort, or an intuitive knowing that guides you towards a positive choice? Those could all be signs that you're being touched by an angel.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like having a spiritual guardian angel watching over us, even if we can't see them. But, if it's all about subtle influence, how do we make ourselves more receptive to that angelic guidance?
Well, the more we cultivate our own spiritual awareness, the more we tune into those subtle frequencies.
So it's not about waiting for a dramatic angelic visitation or anything like that. It's more about cultivating our own connection to the spiritual realm.
Exactly. It's an inside job. The more we focus on developing our own spiritual qualities, things like love, compassion, kindness, forgiveness, the more we align ourselves with that angelic vibration and become magnets for their positive influence.
This is blowing my mind. We've taken angels and demons, these classic archetypes of good and evil, and turned them into representations of spiritual evolution. It's a whole new way of looking at those forces that shape our lives, both here and in the afterlife.
And that's the power of Spiritism. It
Yeah.
challenges us to question our assumptions, to look beyond those traditional dogmas, and to explore the vast and nuanced landscape of the spiritual realm. We could honestly go on and on about this.
I know, right? Wow, this deep dive into Spiritism has been quite the whirlwind. From reincarnation to heaven and hell as states of being, it's definitely given us a lot to ponder.
It really challenges a lot of those traditional notions about the afterlife, doesn't it?
It does. But hey, before we wrap things up, there's one more area I want to circle back to. Remember that erratic state we were talking about, that in-between period after death?
Oh yeah, the cosmic layover before the next big adventure. What about it?
Well, you mentioned that it's not just some cosmic waiting room. According to Spiritism, what are spirits actually doing during that time?
It's actually a really active and purposeful state. Spirits continue to learn and grow, they serve others, and they even play a role in planning their future lives.
Okay, so less like a waiting room and more like a bustling city.
Exactly. It's a vibrant, dynamic world full of activity and purpose. But let's break it down a bit. When spiritists talk about learning in this context, what do they mean?
Yeah, what are these spirits hitting the books on?
Well, imagine a cosmic university where spirits can delve into all sorts of fascinating subjects and expand their understanding of the universe.
Oh, that sounds fun. So what kind of classes are we talking about? Philosophy, astrophysics, cosmic cooking 101?
Hey, maybe. The possibilities are endless. They might study philosophy, spirituality, science, art, anything that helps them grow and evolve.
So it's like Earth School, but on a much grander scale. Hopefully with fewer pop quizzes, though.
You got it. But it's not all lectures and studying. Spirits also get involved in service to others during this time.
Oh, interesting. In what way?
Well, they can act as guides and mentors to less evolved souls, sharing their wisdom and experience, helping them navigate their own journeys through the spiritual realm.
Ah, I love that. So it's like a cosmic support system where the more experienced souls are helping the newbies find their way.
Exactly. It's a beautiful example of the love and compassion that flow through the afterlife. We're all in this together, helping each other learn and grow.
Okay, I have to admit, this whole concept of the erratic state is really starting to grow on me. It's so much more dynamic and hopeful than the traditional view of just, floating around on a cloud for eternity.
It's not about stagnation, but about continued growth and evolution.
Exactly. But before we move on, there's one thing I'm still curious about. You mentioned that spirits participate in planning their future lives during this time. What does that actually look like?
Well, it's kind of like a soul-searching process where spirits reflect on their past experiences, identify areas where they want to grow, and choose the challenges and lessons they want to take on in their next incarnation.
So they're not just randomly assigned a role in some cosmic play. They actually have a say in shaping their future experiences.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that even though we may forget our past lives, our souls carry the wisdom of those experiences, and that wisdom informs the choices we make for our future.
Whoa, that's pretty powerful. It's like we're co-creating our own destinies even across multiple lifetimes.
Exactly. It's all about taking an active role in our own spiritual development. But this brings up an interesting question. What about those who might have made some not so great choices in their past lives? Do they still get a say in planning their next incarnation?
Yeah, so I was thinking, what about those who might need a little cosmic course correction?
Well, remember, Spiritism is all about compassion and growth. Even for those who've strayed from the path, there's always an opportunity to learn and evolve. And the erratic state is the perfect place for that. It offers a chance to reflect, to heal, to make amends.
So it's like a chance to process past mistakes and get a fresh start before moving on to the next chapter.
Exactly. It's about understanding that everyone, regardless of their past choices, has the potential to evolve and grow.
I'm really loving this perspective. It's so much more hopeful and empowering than that whole judgment and punishment thing that we often hear about. But okay, last question about this erratic state, I promise. How long does it actually last? Is there a set time frame, or do spirits get to choose when they're ready to move on?
There's no one-size-fits-all answer to that. It all depends on the individual spirit, their level of evolution, the lessons they're working on, and the complexity of the mission they've chosen for their next life.
So some spirits might be raring to go, ready to jump back into Earth school, while others might need a little more time on the cosmic sidelines.
Exactly. It's a highly individualized process, and no two journeys are exactly alike.
I appreciate that. Makes sense to me. But, all this talk about the erratic state and the opportunity for growth and healing that exists there, it makes me wonder about something we discussed earlier. Remember how we talked about Earth being a world of trials and expiations? Yeah. How does that idea fit in with everything else we've been discussing?
That's a great question. And it really gets to the heart of why Spiritism sees Earth as such a unique and valuable school for the soul.
Okay, I'm ready for another mind-blowing revelation. Tell me, what makes Earth so special in the grand scheme of things?
Well, remember all those challenges we talked about earlier? The physical limitations, the emotional ups and downs, the constant push and pull between good and evil. Those are actually the very things that make this life so valuable for spiritual growth.
Wait, are you serious? You're saying all that stuff that makes us want to scream into a pillow sometimes, that's actually good for us?
In a way, yes. It's like those challenges are our spiritual weight training. They force us to confront our weaknesses, make difficult choices, and learn from our mistakes.
Okay, so Earth is like a cosmic gym for the soul. The tougher the workout, the stronger we get.
That's a great analogy. And that's precisely why, according to Spiritism, we choose to come back here. We recognize the unique opportunities for growth that exist on Earth, and we willingly take on those challenges because we know they'll help us evolve.
So it's not about punishment or suffering for the sake of suffering. It's about recognizing that these challenges are actually opportunities for us to become stronger, wiser, and more compassionate.
Exactly. It's about seeing those hardships not as roadblocks, but as stepping stones on our path to spiritual growth.
I'm starting to understand. It's like we're not just here to endure life, but to use it as a training ground for our souls.
Now you're getting it. And, it makes you appreciate those challenges in a whole new light, doesn't it?
It really does. But I have to ask, if we're consciously choosing to come back to this challenging world, why do we forget our past lives? Wouldn't it be easier to learn and grow if we remembered all those lessons from before?
That's a great question, and it brings us back to that idea of a clean slate, which we talked about earlier. Remember how we were saying that forgetting our past lives allows us to fully immerse ourselves in the present moment and approach each new life with a sense of wonder and possibility.
Yeah, I remember that. So you're saying that forgetting is actually a good thing?
Exactly. It allows us to hit the reset button, to let go of past regrets and attachments, and fully focus on the lessons and experiences of this current lifetime.
I'm seeing that now. It's like each lifetime is a brand new adventure, and we get to write a new story without being limited by the plot twists of our past.
Exactly. And the more we talk about this spiritist view of life, death, and the afterlife, the more it resonates with me. It's such a hopeful and empowering perspective.
I agree. It's a far cry from that fire and brimstone imagery that many of us grew up with, but it just feels more compassionate, more aligned with the idea of a loving and just universe.
Absolutely. And I think the most important takeaway for our listeners is this. No matter what you believe about the afterlife, the key is to focus on living this life to the fullest, making choices that align with your highest values, and striving to become the best version of yourself.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. But wow, what a journey it's been.
It really has. And we've only just scratched the surface of Spiritism. There's so much more to explore.
I know. But for now, we'll have to leave our listeners with that sense of wonder and curiosity. Maybe they'll be inspired to do a little digging of their own.
I hope so. And hey, maybe we can even revisit this topic in a future episode.
That's a great idea.
Yay.
But until then, folks, keep those minds open, those hearts curious, and keep searching for those truths that resonate within you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.